Well, good evening to all the colleagues who are starting to join the page. Welcome once again to the Phase A conferences, as always, on Tuesdays and Fridays. We are here broadcasting, and we're going to greet some of the people who are connecting. Let's hope that the sound is good as well as the audio and the video. Tonight, Angelica is here with us, and Elena is also joining. Javier is here as well, and so is Juan. For those who are joining us for the first time, I recommend watching the first conference of the syllabus. You can find the link below. You will also find the practice group, as well as the Telegram and WhatsApp groups, where we post everything we do here on the page. Well, today's topic is very interesting. It's summarized here in this background image. Here you can see the entire conference summarized in its involutionary process, the parts and the whole process that we are going to discuss tonight. Anna is also here with us tonight. Just a reminder that we have conferences on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 in the evening. For tomorrow, well, let me go ahead and announce that there will be no broadcast. We don't have any way to transmit tomorrow. So tomorrow we won't be broadcasting Phase B. Yes, Phase B at 7 in the evening. We also can't broadcast. Basically, we won't have any transmission at all throughout the day. All right, here Juan tells us karma is what the bugs want us to believe is real. Don't let yourselves be swayed by everything you hear, even if it sounds very eloquent. Well, I assume that the bugs are the eyes, right? Because consciousness is what verifies everything, isn't it? And the bugs are the psychological defects that don't let us see reality. All right, Camilo has also joined us here now, and Alex as well. Here we have Margarita and self-knowledge, Chatty. And the same goes for Eucharist, who just joined. Welcome. So who else is here? Alex too. I hadn't greeted him yet. All right. Great. Armando as well. And also Ani and Blanca. Well, welcome to everyone. We have a very interesting topic tonight. So today we're going to talk about the laws, two of the mechanical laws of nature. On Sunday, we do have a broadcast. We'll have the reflection at 4 in the afternoon, a little later, as well as the practice and the rehearsal. In the morning, there's also a rehearsal, but these rehearsals are not broadcast. We also have Veronica and Viridiana joining us, who just connected. Welcome. All right, let's start tonight's topic, Soton, that is very interesting. Like all the topics are interesting. They leave us with substance and an understanding that allows us to have a solid foundation for undertaking the psychological work that needs to be done. Very well. Conference number 8 from the Phase A syllabus, titled Evolution, Involution, and Revolution. Evolution and involution are two of the 48 laws that govern, well, this universe, this physical plane. So the first thing we're going to look at is what evolution is. Let's also remember that these laws are mechanical. They are laws that We can verify, we can observe. So none of this is made up. All of it is verifiable. So you will see that something evolves and then it involutes, right? At this moment, you can confirm, I assume that you have a cell phone. That cell phone evolves until it starts to malfunction. The circuits begin to generate lower charges, and the electronic movement of that cell phone starts to fail, to become slow. The battery also starts to receive less charge until it deteriorates and it runs out. It doesn't work anymore. That's evolution right there. It reaches a point and then it involutes at the electronic level. A person evolves more or less until they're 30, 35 years old, more or less around that age, maybe a little earlier. It all depends on their degenerative process, might be, right? You reach that age and then you start to age, to deteriorate, to regress until you become old and die. The same thing happens on a psychological level. A person gets excited, feels a lot of joy about something, reaches a peak, and then what used to bring them pleasure no longer catches their attention. So they regress. They get married or enter into a relationship, so it evolves until it ends once they've satisfied their lust, their pleasure. They reach a point, they get saturated, and then comes the regression with anger, rage, fighting, arguments, contempt, and displeasure until that relationship ends in decline. In other words, it's a verifiable law. These aren't laws. We're just making up or presenting to people as another theory or belief. We can see it throughout all of nature, right? Here we're going to look at it on a general level, on a complete level, right? There's a hope that humanity is evolving, but in reality, humanity entered a regressive state a long time ago. You can see how things have been deteriorating. Nowadays, there is 20, 30, 50, 40 times more drugs than there were a few years ago. Drug use has increased, and as for debauchery and sexual lust, it goes without saying. Just look at how much it has grown, especially after the pandemic. The way things have developed, the human race has entered an irreversible state with homosexuality, lesbianism, and all the diversity or degeneration with all these pseudo-genders. We have said that there are only two genders, a female and a male, a man and a woman, nothing more. The rest are just conditions to camouflage homosexuality and lesbianism. In nature, there are only two poles. You cannot in any way create anything through identical poles. So the race is it has already entered a state of more than half of the race no longer, the seed has rotted. This race should already be executed, destroyed, it can't go on any longer. So we see the perversity, the war, the prostitution, all the degeneration that exists right now, the cruelty. And how has it entered into such a brutal involution? And unfortunately, this is already irreversible, isn't it? So the intellectualoid mind, grotesque, thinks that these wars and this degeneration that will pass, that later on we'll understand that we shouldn't fight and that we'll be happy and that technology will give us freedom, right? That's not true. Every day it declines even further. What technology has done is to expand degeneration throughout the world. You see the communication, well, how nowadays all the prostitution and degeneration spreads at a tremendous speed to every corner of the world. Communications have served that purpose. So to dream about a mechanical evolution? No. That has nothing to do with reality. That's simply a concept, you know? We have those theories from these pseudoscientists like Darwin who talk about evolutionary processes, that we come from the ape, the monkey, the orangutan, that we are in a process of evolution. And it turns out it's exactly the opposite. We are heading toward the animal. See, we will be amazed to discover, once we gain some awareness, that a person who enters into evolution, as we will see in this lecture, definitively on a physical level becomes an animal and enters the animal state. So, a person who is asleep, one of these pseudoscientists, has led humanity into a very strong concept. Out of the same pride of not realizing that we are degenerated. So they create these expectations, these false hopes, and deceive people in their own minds, so that they continue to degenerate. So we are going to see that real evolution on a general level in the universe. We can see it here in this background. There we see the entire involutionary process scheme, all right? And we are going to reflect a bit on each of these processes. And evolution begins in the 4 kingdoms of nature. We need to understand, here at the top we have the sacred absolute sun, and there are 7 rays. Each spark emerges through one of those 7 rays. To emerge is to enter, right? So it enters a machine called the universe. And the moment it enters, well, it begins to seek its mastery. That's what this machine is for. That's what it comes to this school. Let us remember that in the absolute there is only one law, no more, the law of love. It enters a machine that is governed by anywhere from 1 to 24,576 laws, with 48 basic laws, which are the dimensions, right? And the infra dimensions, which from there on are the rest of the laws. All right, it enters to take the course. It enters to seek that mastery, that self-realization, right? This is called the wheel of samsara. Very few sparks out of the hundreds of trillions and trillions that enter actually make it. It is very rare for someone to achieve self-realization. Most sparks fail. Now, all of them know why they are here. From the moment they arrive, from the moment they enter, they know they are here to seek that mastery, but they have free will. So they are not going to be forced. This spark is given 3,000 turns. In other words, it can go around this wheel 3,000 times. It goes around 3,000 times, right? So for each cycle, it will have to go through the 4 kingdoms of nature in evolution, and the 4 kingdoms of nature in involution. These 8 points, 8 levels, are called one turn, right? So it is given 3,000 opportunities. When it reaches the human state, only in the human state, which is the 4th kingdom, it is given 108 existences, right? As a human. This is called the law of return. All right. I hope I made myself clear. There are 3 alternatives that this spark, which entered this great machine called the universe, will have triumph. That is achieving self-realization through one's own effort, sacrifice, and personal decision, which is what we are trying to do right now with all this knowledge. The other would be failure, where it runs out of existences, its cycles are exhausted. the 3,000 cycles, and it returns to the absolute, having failed, completely failed. And the other would be that in one of those cycles, it voluntarily renounces the wheel, that is the universe. In that case, that renunciation also leads to failures. In other words, the only option is triumph, that is to do the work of the being, right? Here we find two entities, on the right side. Here you see where the monster is, because I don't know how it looks over there. I think it appears on the left side. But on the right, Anubis rises. Here we find him, the jackal, pointing upward towards self-realization. And he is in charge of evolution, meaning he is the one directing the entire process of divine law and perfectly manages all the laws that govern evolution. And on the left is Typhon. Typhon is the entity or the dark force that governs evolution. All right, so we have those four kingdoms. Let's look at each one. In evolution, we have the mineral, plant, animal, and human kingdoms. That is where Anubis is, if you can see him there. The spark enters the mineral kingdom because at that point it knows nothing about the universe. They have to put it into a very simple machine. They can't put it into a very complex machine. So they put it into a little machine called a stone or mineral. They connect it to the evolutionary mineral physical body. What does evolutionary mean? It means that it is subtle, that the spark is there, right? If you, for example, take an emerald, the beauty of that emerald is the beauty of the spark, right? There, it is called a pygmy gnome. There we see gold, we see diamonds, we see precious stones, right? Silver, zircon, platinum, palladium. The spark enters without any defects and begins its process. It is assigned its first brain, which is the emotional one. The spark now begins to have emotions. It stays there for many years, possibly centuries or more. And it remains there, as it were. That is a long time. For the being, though, time does not exist. And here there is no defined time. The spark begins to show signs of maturity. It begins to develop its first defects of disobedience. It's like a child entering school. The child comes in without any bad habits, but the other kids start to corrupt him. So there are some sparks that are a bit more degenerate who end up corrupting the others. And the spark starts to develop its first defects. Disobedience, playfulness, antipathy, disorder. In that realm, the spark's duty is to attend school. It is taught many things about that realm, how it works. And when Nubis realizes that the spark is ready, he moves it on to the next realm. There, the spark is happy. Even though it is limited, it is still happy. It is happy because it is in nature, there is sunlight. It moves on to the plant kingdom, a more complex machine. They connect it, and it always travels along the same ray. From the moment it leaves the absolute, it passes through all the kingdoms on the same ray. Here it is now called an elemental. It is no longer called an... It keeps descending and keeps developing more defects. At this point, it already has another brain called the motor instinctive sexual brain. It is assigned, but in a primary way. The movements are very slow. The plant has very gentle movements in its leaves, in its branches, but they are very slight develops Joes. Now, for example, the pine tree does not allow. It releases some spores. It does not allow other plants to grow near it. They already have to fight for sunlight, so they must compete with other plants. They develop certain egos of envy, of competition. They also fight for food against parasitic plants. For example, they have to struggle. And well, they also spend time playing in nature. Let's say the most common egos are those related to play, because they don't have any responsibility. They're like children, so they play. When they start to mature, they take on a little more responsibility and leave play behind, just like a small child. The first thing a child has is play. Until they start to mature and become a bit more focused, they keep learning things from that kingdom of nature. There, they are guided by some teachers called the gurus, Guru Devas. And when they see that they have accumulated enough defects in this kingdom, then Nubis moves them to the next kingdom, which is the animal kingdom. Well, plants are edible. Rice, beans, lentils, pine, oaks, very beautiful trees, very fine woods, because the spark is there. So that spark, by living in that plant, gives it its beauty, gives it its quality. Then we move on to the evolutionary animal kingdom. Here, the spark continues. Here it is no longer called an elemental as it is in plants. In plants it is called an elemental. Here it is called the anima of the animal, the anima of the animal. And here, the motor instinctive sexual center is fully developed, and now the animal can reproduce directly. It seeks out the female. It already has a herd instinct. It already protects the herd. It has a survival instinct. Anger, the murderous eye, it has to search for its food. And it begins to form other eyes. It becomes very agile, cunning. It learns to survive in a harsh environment, a rough environment, a violent environment, a wild environment. It develops fear. It develops instincts of self-preservation, reproductive instincts, direct ones. Well, it develops a few more eyes. Very beautiful animals, absolutely purebred dogs, thoroughbred horses, birds, condors, eagles. Well, very beautiful animals, very refined. Because let's remember that the spark is free. It's there inside the animal. Finally, after many centuries, thousands or millions of centuries of this whole process, it finally reaches the human kingdom. And here, there is already something interesting about the human kingdom. It brings along a few somewhat developed eyes, but not very strong ones. Here, it is given the last brain. It is called... Now, it has all three, right? It is 3 brains. Well, animals do not see in 3 dimensions because they only have 2 brains. Although if they are very advanced, they manage to perceive the beginnings of the 3rd dimension, but not fully. Here, with the 3rd brain, which is the intellectual one, they can now see all 3 dimensions perfectly. Here it is already called, it receives the name principle of soul, which is consciousness. And it is connected to the first physical body. Here, something interesting in this kingdom is that free will is given. In the previous kingdoms, there is no free will because it is not yet formed, but here it is. And it will descend to 9 degrees in its process. There are 12 levels of 9 degrees each. That gives a total of 108 existences. In the primary or first existences, everything is free. There are no borders, everyone is free. Everyone goes wherever they want, the planet is open. They are in tribes. They operate at a certain level. of purity. Human bodies are very beautiful. Don't go on believing in Darwin's theory, because Darwin actually gives information that is completely the opposite. In the beginning, the human body is very, very well formed, very, very beautiful. It's not like now where everyone is deformed, fat or skinny. Everyone, you look at all the bodies have deficiencies in shape, color, skin texture, eyes. Well, they have many deficiencies. But in those times, no. The bodies are very, very, very beautiful. All right. As the process goes on, the ego keeps developing more and more. When it reaches existence 54, at that point, psychologically, evolution ends. After the 54th existence, como psychologically, como involution begins. Then instinct puts the intellect at its service. It dominates the mind, right? And that whole degenerative process accelerates. So cities are created, the planet is divided, countries are formed, laws are made, everything becomes enclosed. Now, economic power ends up in the hands of a few. There is misery, there is poverty. Well, everything that exists nowadays in the cities. Degeneration becomes concentrated, drugs, alcohol, prostitution, right? And that's where we're headed. When a person finishes the 108 lifetimes, well, there's no other option left but to enter into physical involution. Right now, the whole race, the vast majority, more than 90% of humanity is in those 108 lifetimes. So nowadays, everyone who dies and in their 108 lifetimes enters directly into involution. That involution is called the second death, right? So that's the evolutionary process. Evolutionary. Now, let's look at involution, shall we? Involution is when the spark already enters. The infra dimensions of planet Earth. We've already covered the topic of the infra dimensions. Oh, no. Did we? Have we already covered it? Yes. All right. And there, it has to suffer. The ego is forcibly torn away. Let's see that the spark, say that suffers a lot. They connect it to an involutive animal, a rat, a dog, sickly, foul-smelling, ugly, to a body, to an involutive animal, right? Ordinary. Why is it ordinary? Why is it involutive? Because the spark isn't in that body, it's in involution. It's inside the planet Earth. Then later on, after it has paid for all the pain, with pain, all the karma it created, it will move on to the vegetaloid realm. Here it's called animaloid. In the vegetaloid, it's the same. Plants that have no beauty, parasitic plants, grass, plants that have no value, ordinary, ugly. The same thing, it stays there for other centuries, depending also on the karma and the degeneration it has had. With pain, they keep tearing away all that ego and making it pay for its karma with pain. Then after the appropriate amount of time, it moves on to the mineraloid, and that's where total decomposition happens. Because it can be thousands or millions of years there. Everything depends on the process it has gone through, and finally the spark comes out through the 9th Dantean circle once again to receive the rays of the sun, to begin a new cycle. In other words, a new turn, a new round of samsara. That is the mechanical process that applies to any spark from any part of the universe, right? It is a law. And we must understand that before God created the universe, He created the laws. because it is upon those laws that the way the machine will operate can be developed. So, here po, if we want to free ourselves from all of this, tariwa, the only option is to get involved in something called the Pama revolution. Right? But the revolution can only be applied when we are in the human kingdom, because in the other kingdoms we don't have freedom, we don't have free will, and we don't have the three brains developed. So it must be in the human kingdom. What does the revolution consist of? Well, what knowledge shows us. The first thing we must understand is that we are inside a machine, and that this machine called the universe, called planet Earth nature, is swallowing us up because of a law. Or as we see here, the law of involution, or the law of entropy, the law of the trogo, the law of the octaves. There we see these laws that show us how nature is simply using us for its own interests. So every day it consumes our energy through our egos. Therefore, the revolution is a knowledge that leads us to free ourselves from this universe, to unite with God, to unite with the being, to seek that self-realization, right? That's why it's called a revolution. The revolution is the work that must be done with the three factors. That's why they're called the three factors of the revolution of consciousness. And we're going to put an end to the ego, which is what keeps us imprisoned, bound to all these laws. We're going to transcend the laws and free ourselves, right? So this is highly revolutionary knowledge. It's knowledge that was born with the universe itself and was given to us precisely so we could get out of the machine. But if a person doesn't want to, then they'll remain stuck in the machine, believing they can get out, believing they can control time and that there's a future, and that no. The person is born, dies, and doesn't realize it. And people are very rare, the people who want to see beyond their conditioning. Normally, no one wants to put an end to pleasure, and the foundation of the machine is pleasure. So the machine has everyone tied down because of pleasure, because of enjoyment, because of gratification. You see, the pleasure of having sex, the pleasure of watching porn, the pleasure of being on your phone all day watching videos, the pleasure of sleeping, the pleitra seeking, the pleasure of taking drugs. In other words, every eye has its own pleasure. That's why it's important to kill pleasure, to kill the eyes, and for that psychological death is applied, right? So if we kill the eyes, we can free ourselves from this machine. If we don't kill the eyes, we will remain prisoners of the machine, because the machine lives off the eyes. It uses the eyes to manage, to sustain itself. So psychological death is that, putting an end to all the ways we currently have of thinking, feeling, desiring, instinct, or all the pleasure and all sexual and motor activity. And in this way, we will be able to make progress in the process of awakening consciousness. Spiritual birth, the impulse, love, like the person, suprasex, sexual energy. This is what will generate the motivation, the drive, the will to face things more and more, to delve deeper into knowledge. At first, one works little, then gradually increases the levels, developing self-discipline until they can fully dedicate their time to the work of the being. All day long in death, working on birth with the partner, and helping millions of people by sharing this knowledge with them. This is the sacrifice for humanity, represented by these three factors of the revolution of consciousness. You have to ask the mother to kill every little detail. Strive to be in self-remembering all day. Keep the mind silent control your emotions, have self-discipline in reflective death, okay? And apply active deaths all day long, on the street, at home, wherever you are, right? You have to fix your consciousness. You have to create the superior existential bodies of the being through supersex, which is the union of a man and a woman. Sexually, transmuting that energy without reaching ejaculation or orgasm. They use that energy to regenerate, revitalize, strengthen themselves, and logically to create these internal bodies. Sacrifice for humanity, well, that is love. To give knowledge to everyone without mixing it in a free manner. Under no circumstances can knowledge be mixed with absolutely anything from this universe. Not with witchcraft, not with medicine, not with family details, not with money, not with friendships and interest, not with any kind of sentimentality, not with music, nor any of that, because all of that belongs to the universe. And if you mix it with things that must die, then self-realization is no longer possible. You become bound within the universe. That is why it is a highly revolutionary knowledge. That is why it is called a revolution. Well, that is the process, looking at it on a macro level, on a general level, which applies to all of us. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, we can study this law in small things, but the lecture invites us to look at it on a macro level in its entirety. How these laws occur and how they develop throughout all of creation, in all of creation, planets, solar systems, galaxies, everything undergoes evolution and involution. Very well, with this I conclude tonight's lecture. We are going to answer some questions that I see are already here. Let's greet some people, some friends who arrived a little later. Ani just joined us. Who else? Armando. Oh, right, no, I had already greeted Armando. Very Diana. Luz Leonel. Veronica, Alex, Jose, Uper is also here, and Laura Leti. Well, here we have a message. Let's see. Let's see. Alex says, every time a cycle of this wheel of samsara ends, does a soul end, or is it the same one? Please, greetings from Pachuca, Hidalgo, Mexico. It is always the same consciousness, always. The soul ends, well, the soul is the ego. The ego develops. So as you go into involution, all of that is destroyed. So the spark remains once again, without ego. When it comes out of involution, it emerges with the causal eyes for a new evolution. So it loses everything. It has to start again in the mineral kingdom to create the ego again, to create that soul again, right? To see if, when it reaches the human kingdom, it can draw from that spark, where I believe it can draw wisdom and achieve self-realization. So it also needs to go through that process. Well, here Veronica says, would evolution be eternity, a self-realized being? No, evolution is a law. To achieve self-realization, it would be revolution. All beings are in revolution. Everything becomes or must become revolutionary. Everything. You must make your romantic relationship revolutionary. What does that mean? It means you must kill the enamored self. And you must kill the self of heartbreak, right? Because if you don't kill the self, the enamored one, which are the selves of lust, you arrive. You satisfy yourselves, and then involution takes hold of you through anger, heartbreak, annoyance, contempt, displeasure, impotence, and then you no longer want that partner. if you kill that and also kill the enamored self, then you maintain the relationship and keep it in revolution. Revolution with money, revolution with friendships, revolution with family. To live in revolution, that is to live in death. That is the state in which, logically, by maintaining self-remembering, tranquility, inner peace, the search for harmony and living relaxed and calm, all of that is achieved through death. That is the revolution. Alex says, so are we given a soul? Or does the same soul continue through the 324,000 existences? In each cycle, the ego develops. That ego is called the soul, right? The psyche, the I. If the I is killed, then the human soul is created, right? If the I is not killed, the soul is lost. One has to go back again to develop the ego in order to extract wisdom. We could say that consciousness is a principle of the soul, but it is not the soul in its entirety, not complete. The soul is trapped within the ego, right? Well, here Jose says, Luis Carlos, will the human race be sustained by a collective percentage of consciousness and vibration? No one is interested in awakening consciousness. No one is interested. People think that having consciousness means praying, being in a church, worshipping an effigy called God, full of sentimentality, behaving well. That is not having a soul, that is not having consciousness. That is just being good. And the ego can be good. The eyes can be good. And they can be bad. Here, it's not about being good or bad. It's about being conscious. There is a big difference. Well, here Luis says everything no, you share with us is a reality. Every day I see it for myself. That's what knowledge is about, that the person sees it, assimilates it, understands it, works on it in order to see more deeply. That's what it's about. Well, Jose, here Luis Carlos tells us in Colombia, the El Golfo Clan de que is a criminal organization, and there's a pamphlet from this dark entity circulating, threatening the LGBT community. What do you think? Well, they are full of hate. They are full. That's the you. This ego that despises, that rejects, the homophobic ego. Homophobia, when someone is homophobic, it's because they don't want to recognize that they also have homosexual egos. They are extremist groups. They're like Hitler, right? Like the Islamic groups. And they want to fix things with violence, with death. These are karmas that exist. In this country, in Colombia, there is a lot of violence. There are some very old processes, and in this land, that violent force must be present. Back in the times of Lemuria, this was a prison, and there is a very strong concentration of energy here. And well, here, there is knowledge, and two Christs have come from here. So, of course, these forces must exist here, right? On one side or the other. And well, what we need to do is understand, right? To identify ourselves. If I'm going to support dark forces, well, that's not what I'm here for. These forces are dark, and homosexuality is also a dark force. So it's a war between very heavy psychological entities. And we didn't come here to support dark forces, neither good nor bad. Nor did we come to hate anyone. On the contrary, we came to respect humanity, to love humanity, and to help humanity. So we cannot be in those states of support in any way. We accept degeneration because one cannot violate anyone's free will, but we do not share in it. I do not condone homosexuality, nor prostitution, nor murders, nor thefts. In other words, I don't share in anything of this race, but I do accept and respect the brothers and sisters who are in all these processes. If someone wants to be homosexual, that's their problem. So if a girl wants to be a prostitute, well, that's she has the right. I have no reason to go around feeling bad, because if I feel bad, it's because I'm full of envy or hatred or fear. And I need to get rid of all that in order to understand and respect my brothers and sisters. Everyone has the right to do whatever they want with their life, their body, their money. That's what we came here for knowledge. So within myself, I am not going to accept homosexuals, prostitutes, drug addicts, murderers, drunks, or terrorists. But outside, our brothers and sisters have the right to do whatever they want. We have to understand that. Otherwise, we become sectarian and fanatical and extremist, and we end up being just like them. So that's not what we came here for. Well, here Utper says renunciation. Is it done by the being or by the human? We are the ones who do the work. We receive strength from the being, but the decision is up to each of us. Laura Letty. Behind all of that process, there is always a master. But those who lead the Black Lodge, the entire Black Lodge, are the black magicians. They are the ones who direct that. And the one who leads the black magicians is Typhon. But behind all of that, the divine law is always organizing it. Because everything is moved by God. Everything, absolutely everything. Well, let's also greet Celia here. Pepe as well. Well, he's around here. John says, good evening, Luis, and to everyone. I have a question. A spark that it comes for the first time to the evolutionary side and starts to acquire defects, would that be the origin of the ego in that spark? Yes, on a psychological level. On a physical level, it hasn't fornicated yet. But yes, it has already developed certain traits. But let's remember that there are sparks that do not fall, and there are sparks that do fall. All of us fell. The ego originated because of the fall. These sparks that do not fall acquire knowledge by observing outwardly because they do not develop it within. They are virginal, pure sparks, right? And the sparks that fall, well, they enter into the process, a different process, right? And the sparks that do not fall must go through the kingdoms, but in a slow learning process, a very slow one. It takes them much longer to acquire the knowledge of the kingdom. Well, Laura Letty says, the species from plant, animal to human, it degenerates. That much I understand. The question is, are animals being castrated? When they are castrated, does that lustful ego stop? Or is it just repressed until it passes into a human? Does it develop? Does it develop? Or how does that aspect, that process, work? Thank you very much. Look, nowadays this process of castration is a crime against nature. It terribly violates nature. The animal is not to blame. And the person pays the karma for doing that. And as for the animal, no, the animal is simply given another animal body, a cat or a dog, and that's it. In some way they compensate the animal for the pain caused by the human, because no one should have to pay for what they don't owe. So the divine law compensates for this. When the animal is in involution, then it has to go through processes of castration, humiliation, pain, empombosa, and violence, because it is in involution and is paying for it. All of this is very relative, isn't it? Javier Luis. Normally, in this inner work, We do it according to our own ability and will. But when the Father intervenes, He will throw everything up in the air, show how little or nothing has actually been done, and mark out and push us forward. And one wonders, what could this be due to? Well, a teaching that they gave us, or that I was given, is that if they aren't pressured, they don't work. And the person is content to work 10 minutes a day and believes that with that, they will achieve self-realization. So you have to apply pressure. So they keep pressuring you to increase your work. And more and more. Do you think that if you aren't pressured, you will achieve self-realization? You will never achieve self-realization because laziness won't let you. If you don't push your resistance to the maximum, you can't make progress. A person who wants to win at the Olympic Games, Korenki, who wants to be a good athlete, needs between 8 and 10 hours of work of daily training. Do you think that by training for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're going to make it to the Olympics or become an outstanding athlete? Never. It's the same here, it's the same principle. So if the person doesn't measure up, Bapo, they're going to be pressured. They're going to be given their karma because it has to be paid, right? Now there's free will. You have two options. Either you work or you don't work. That's it. But you have the right to leave whenever you want. If you can't handle the pressure, if you can't handle the demands, then you simply quit. So no one is going to be forced, but they will be pressured. That's how it is. Every coach is going to push their student. In any sport, in any job, in any circumstance, it's going to be the same. So God is not violating free will. What He is doing is applying pressure to help the person move forward. But if they don't feel like it, well, they have the right to leave whenever they want. You come here for knowledge. Here, we're not demanding that you sign a clause or a contract or that you move from one level to another, right? Here, we don't even require your name. Nothing at all. You receive some knowledge and it's up to you whether you use it or not. And if they don't want to use it, then they return to the normal egotistical life of social degeneration. And that's it. That's all there is to it. No one is going to be forced. So you have to understand that if you think that God is going to force you, no, God doesn't force you. The being puts pressure on you. If you don't measure up, then you just go and keep on with marijuana or alcohol, or you go to prostitutes or whatever you want. Everyone is free. And if you decide to do the work, then you know that, well, the pressure is necessary because it helps you develop the strength and willpower needed to move forward. Andres says, good evening, Luis. Are there beings who can have two sparks instead of one? And another question, can two beings exchange their spark? No? No. The being only has, it's just one spark. That spark is divided into thousands of parts. We see that in the lectures, right? The spark is divided into the Father, the Mother, the elemental intercessor, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Well, all the parts of the being, there are many parts. The spark is divided. There are the 7 consciousnesses. Each consciousness is in one of the dimensions. The spark is divided, right? And it's only one spark, nothing more. And that idea of exchanging sparks, no. How could you exchange sparks if it's just one, a single being? Made up of many parts, but still a single being. What would it exchange with another being? If each being is autonomous, each being is free, each being is complete. Do beings help each other? Of course, but they're not going to exchange themselves because each one has its own work and the development of its own inner universe. All right. Camilo says, Luis, I would like to know what happens when a person who is trying to achieve self-realization has gone several months without having sexual relations, but then has an almost erotic dream. And I say almost because there is no intercourse in the dream, but rather he just sees a woman undressing. He wakes up from the dream, and when he does, he's wet. This person who has the dream examines himself closely but doesn't find any bruises on his body. What do you think happened? He had a nocturnal emission because he isn't working enough on his lust. So we see this in the lecture on how to control nocturnal emissions and sexual falls, right? You have to work on lust every single day. The day must come when you can perfectly well see a naked woman and not feel any kind of lust, desire, nothing. Just like a child naturally sees a woman and feels nothing. And when that person goes to practice suprasex, well, they will become sexually aroused, but without that lust they're used to. So these are very different things, right? No, the experience is meant for you to work on your lust. Everything you experienced when seeing that woman is what must die. Well, here we greet the lily. Camilo says, Luis, when you talk about suprasex, no? Do you mean having sexual relations without reaching orgasm? Yes, with a partner of the opposite sex, man and woman. There is no repression, no pressure, all of that dies. Because people think they're going to repress themselves. It turns out that the repressed self is also a self that must die. It's something natural. Javier says, Luis, why does the master say that if the being works on its spark, it would never descend? What? It would descend in failure. Let's see. To involution. Why does he say that if the responsibility is one's own? Help yourself and I will help you. If you don't do the work, you won't receive help. The being is not going to force you to self-realize because the being is not a tyrant. Do you understand? So, you have to work in order for the being to act. There are sparks that in this existence are not going to self-realize because they come from another ray, because they have too much karma, because the spark is already too trapped in the egos and it just can't get out anymore. But if someone is drawn to the knowledge, the being is always providing the strength and motivation, but the spark doesn't want to. So the decision is yours because the being, you might ask the being wants to self-realize, but the personality does not. So the spark can't, doesn't want to overcome the personality. So God is not a tyrant, not abusive, not even with his own spark. He respects that spark, and if he sees that it doesn't want to, he doesn't pressure it anymore, he leaves it alone. He withdraws, and the spark here keeps fornicating, degenerating until it dies. That's how it is. It says here. Ryomen, well, it says, falling in love is an ego. The enamored ego is an ego of lust. We don't know what true falling in love is. We have to kill lust in order to feel true love. It's something pure, something without perversion, without lewdness, without lust, without passion, none of that. Well, over here it says, Lirio says the volume is very low, but no, I think, let's check, although it's already, the conference is already over. But anyway, I'll check to see if the volume is low. No, the volume is fine. The volume is just fine. Well, Christian says, Luis, regarding the origin of the ego, is fornication then the wheel of samsara? Was it created after the expulsion from paradise? No. The wheel of samsara begins when the spark first enters the universe. By the time the ego originates, the spark has already developed and has reached the human state, which is when the spark falls, right? There we see that lecture on the origin of the ego, where we talk very clearly about that, right? Well, Camilo, and then says, Omite, Luis, do you think that people who have sexual viruses in their bodies are paying off karma? No, all those are diseases like cancer, AIDS, venereal diseases are due to lust. Yes, they are paying karma for that. With pain, right? Anderson Luis, why does the being fight for its spark? For example, if the person is already in processes of homosexuality and very strong involutive states, the being is always trying to get the spark to work. Always. Always. But if the spark doesn't want to, the being can't do anything because the spark has free will. But there are people who are not in the knowledge, and the being tries to motivate them to work, but they don't want to. Well, Viridiana says Typhon is Baphomet. Typhoon is the aspect of Typhon in Involution is an entity, a dark force. And Typhon Baphomet is Lucifer. It's the goat, right? Among the Templars, that's Lucifer. Yes. Well, here it says, why is God the devil? In reverse, Luis asks. The inverted fire, the Antichrist. So when a God falls, he becomes ego. When he rises, he becomes God. In the end, both forces, the dark and the light, come from the same source. Andre says, Luis, how do I know which number life I'm on and which cycle I'll go to? It gives me a pension. He must mean pressure, right? That I'm in my last existence and I'm already a bit old. No, don't worry. If you work on the path and die, they'll give you another existence. 109 or 110. How to know? Well, no, you have to investigate it astrally. Astrally, it tells you which existence you're on. I'm on my last one. And if I die or get killed, the being gives me another because it already told me. So I have no problem. Camilo Luis, what kind of exercise do you recommend for self-realization? The 3 factors, there's no other way. All day long. Seek inner silence, kill the egos. Remain in self-remembering. To be in self-remembering is to be awake. A silent mind, controlled emotions, controlled instincts, no internal activity. If you're going to solve a problem, you bring in a tool called reflection. Concentration. Confrontation. But if you're not in that process, the mind must remain silent. All day long. That's the struggle, isn't it? And well, the reflective death, let's say that's the foundation of the work. Javier says, Luis, does consciousness retain any wisdom from the cycles it goes through? Or is all of that lost every time it descends into involution? Yes, everything. Absolutely everything is lost. Only 3% of consciousness remains, and 97% innocence. Viridiana. Luis, our being is consciousness, and at the same time, the union of all beings is consciousness itself. The union of all beings forms God. Perfect multiple unity. We each have a little piece of God called consciousness. We still need to recover the other 97%. So a spark is not the same as a self-realized being. Anderson, Luis, Can the being be affected by the radiations that its spark emits when it goes through involution? No. The mother helps in the she also enters into the process, helping the spark during involution. The being is the ultimate power. The spark, at first, it feels the being's light is very intense for the spark. So you understand me. That's why the work is done gradually. That's why there's a teaching that says whoever sees God dies. It's not the other way around. The being has too much power, and the spark has very little power. It gradually acquires all the knowledge of the being, the light of the being. The spark acquires it little by little. Well, here Angelica says, what is that test then where they say the strength of the spark is measured to see if it is strong enough for self-realization? Is it that the spark runs toward or away from the tornado? They give it the test of renunciation. If the spark is attached to something in the universe, it cannot renounce. So they give it the test. If it doesn't pass the test, it is not allowed to renounce. Yes, if it is attached to lust, to money, to anything it clings to, it is not ready to renounce. So they don't let it renounce. Because before accepting its renunciation, it must pass some tests. Alirio, what kind of karma is it when sores appear on the feet, back, from the knees down? I don't know. It needs to be investigated because I'm not a doctor. I don't know. So I don't know. It must be something where several egos are involved, but it needs to be looked into. That karma needs to be paid. Luis, so is God always with me, even if I don't perish? No. A degenerated spark. The being distances itself from you. So a person who is involved in drugs, alcohol, prostitution, well, the whole race, the race doesn't want anything to do with God. Nobody wants God. People want to worship a God, a religious God. God is in sexual energy, in fire. When a person ejaculates their semen, they expel God. They remove him from their body. They remove love from their body. They remove power. So here, nobody is interested in God. I'm talking about the being. I'm talking about the true God. I'm not talking about the God of the Bible and religion and sanctimoniousness and cheap mysticism. I'm talking about the being, about the true God. And the power of God and the strength of God are in sexual energy, and people don't want their sexual energy. They fornicate. They expel that energy because they want to experience pleasure and pain, and they want to experience weakness. A person who loves God would never expel their energy from the body because that energy will turn into ego. It will feed the ego. So we need to understand that people are not interested in God. People get annoyed with that energy in their bodies. They want to get rid of it. Well, here one says, so we are in a matrix in which two-dimensional beings feed on our infinite energy and make us believe that karma and all the laws of this reality are true just to keep us as prisoners and prevent us from becoming infinite light. Well, there are certain concepts being discussed here that, to be honest, can be described as quite mysterious or even mystical in nature, making them difficult for many people to fully understand or explain. When we talk about the machine of the universe, it's a school. And we have the freedom to stay there or to free ourselves. But people like to be slaves. No one wants knowledge. Everyone remains a prisoner of their lust, their hatred, their anger, their fear, their intellectualism, attached to all things of the masses, of matter. No one wants to work. They're not interested. They don't want to. So everyone wants to keep being a slave, right? And as for infinite light, well, what light do we have? If we are all degenerated, we waste our mental energy. We fornicate away our emotional and instinctive energy. We drain all our energies. What light are we talking about? There is no light at all. Those sentimental ideas about God and love and about light and fraternity, all of that is just cheap concepts. We have to face the harsh reality. The harsh reality is that everyone is degenerated, no, or we are degenerated, no, and very few of us want to regenerate ourselves. That is the reality. And the light will come if one works on death. Light is the wisdom of the Father. But if you don't work on death, what light is there? There is nothing. That's just pure intellectual sentimentality, isn't it? Philosophical, mystical. So we have to get out of all that. Well, here, stepping on some toes, as Luis says, did artists, athletes, singers, and world leaders have degrees of work to have that inverted force? Yes, some of them. Some are bodhisattvas, others are initiates. Or were, right? And now they've turned that force around. Anderson, Luis, in your case, in the event that you pass away, how would you? Avoid losing consciousness? Or does it remain awake so that in a new existence you can continue the work? It depends. It depends. If I die in a few years, well, I don't think so. Because the being doesn't want me to disincarnate until I have self. Well, in other words, I have to achieve self-realization. So I don't think about that. If it were up to me, I would actually like to disincarnate. But they won't let me. So I have to keep working. And it depends on the state of consciousness you live with, right? If you have to die, well, it depends on the consciousness you have. Well, Juan Gada says, you yourself are Godic, or the concept of God como in this world is misguided. One thing is being and another thing is oneself. What happens is that people are full of mystical concepts. And so they come out with eloquent phrases, philosophical, beautiful, poetic, sentimental, just concepts. Have you already gone to speak with the Father, with the Mother, with the Being? Have you already gone to speak with Master Jesus, with Buddha, or with Saint Germain or Cagliostro? Have you already gone to learn about those kinds of things? No. All that information from books and religions, and it's all just intellect. That doesn't help us. Here, people are taught to verify for themselves theory, because they just swap one theory for another and defend it to the death. That's pure fanaticism. So, one should be reflective and ask, what am I basing this on? What do I actually know for myself? Here we teach astral projection, we teach psychological death, to awaken consciousness, to investigate, to draw wisdom from within yourself. But that idea that God is yourself, a degenerate, a drug addict, a masturbator, weak and fearful, what kind of God could you possibly have inside? What God are they talking about? It's nonsense. It doesn't even hold up to a superficial reflection because it falls apart on its own. So let's be a little more coherent, because that's what this rebellious knowledge is about. Because mysticism is everywhere. So it's just empty talk here and there, but there are no real actions. There's nothing at all. There's just a void there. So, well, if someone goes, talks, investigates, and then comes back and says, in my past life, this happened, I was a Nazi, I raped Jewish women, I died, and now I have this karma of a venereal disease in my sexual organs because I was a rapist and an abuser. So that is knowledge. Now pay your karma so that you can be rid of that disease. Go to the tribunal, take care of your business. That is knowledge. But to come and say nonsense like, oh, I have God within me. There you have the priests with their so-called inner God, they abusing children. All of them sexually repressed, all of them depraved, with those pious poses, and they call that God. That's just nonsense. So here we need to start being coherent and serious, because that's what we came to knowledge for. Otherwise, why are we here? To fill ourselves with more theories and get angry because people don't accept what we say? Well, no. One thing is revolution, seriousness, rigor, and another thing is approaching things in a mystical way and bringing people into that same process. So I don't think that's the right thing to do, is it? Well, here Pepe says that God is in substance and in consciousness. You have to seek it through death, through work. That is how the being draws closer. Alirio says, Don Luis, forgive me if I'm bothering you. No, don't worry. Question, why would such an advanced person want to die? It's very important to achieve the highest with the being. Yes, what happens is that there are crises, right? And there are very intense crises where one, yes, falls into pride or anger, and would like to be taken out of the body, but no, you have to keep working. Yes, that's right. There are selves that sometimes react that way. But, well, little by little, we start to understand. Well, it seems there are no more questions. Thank you all very much for attending and participating. I hope this lecture has been helpful to you in some way, so that you reflect, so that you feel encouraged to keep fighting and investigating your own issues, right? It is very pleasant to start receiving information directly from the Father. You no longer get it from the internet or from books or things like that. Now the information comes to you directly from sources much higher than the mind. And, well, that's how you start waking up and seeing the harsh reality of life, of nature, of society, of yourself, right? Well, I think that's all. Yes. So I'm going to answer these questions and then we'll go. Let's see. Over here, Camilo says, Luis, thank you so much for helping us. You have no idea how long I had been searching for this knowledge. Well, I'm glad, and I hope you all stay and keep working, right? Because here, the reality is the work. Alirio, what happens to me is that I get very angry at times, fighting to reach the being. Yes, we have to kill all these egos because we are all proud, and we need to change that attitude, right? To be more respectful toward the being. Viridiana. The thing is, some people don't really understand the difference between our consciousnesses. Our awakened consciousness is a part of God, but at the level we're at, where we couldn't be more degenerate because it's not possible. And when we talk about being light and love, imagination is one thing and reality is another. Yes, we really need to reflect on those mystical sentimentalities that make us feel like we're something superior. When if we look at ourselves honestly, we have dark emotions, dark desires, lust, sentimentality, and seeing the harsh reality of what we are here, we can't hide. Everything we have inside us, we have to observe it. That's what the process of psychological death teaches us, right? All right, that's it. Here Alba says, thank you very much, Mr. Luis. Oh no, thank you all for being so kind and participating and coming to the lecture, because it's nice to teach, isn't it? And if there are colleagues or people who receive these topics, well, that's, you feel the energy, that you're helping humanity So here, everyone is welcome. Don't worry, we're not going to charge you a single peso. Nor will we ask you to subscribe to any channel, or to like us, or to make any contributions or anything like that. So everything here is free. All right, that's all from me. I'll say goodbye now. Have a pleasant rest of your night. Don't lose your strength. Keep working. And hopefully the being will show you, will help you. Always. Ask and keep asking. Work hard on death during the day and you'll see that at night you'll get some information. You'll get something. It's always like that. And you will start to gain confidence in yourselves and begin to receive guidance from a true being, not from some talkative physical clown, nor from an instructor, nor from a pseudo-master. Be rebellious. Don't lose your strength. Don't let yourselves be manipulated. Don't let yourselves be violated. Don't let yourselves be used by your own egos or by the egos of anyone else. And well, we'll continue there in the conferences, learning more. You are all cordially invited. Tomorrow we don't have a conference. We have to resolve some matters. It seems there's no electricity here, so we can't broadcast. On Sunday, we'll be waiting for you at the 4 o'clock reflection. So everyone is welcome, all right? That's all for now, so we'll leave it at that. Have a pleasant rest of the night, and hopefully with awareness.